And the sixth treatment for erectile dysfunction is hormone balancing. I don't know if many of you guys know this, but testosterone is a very powerful vasodilator. It actually stimulates your nitric oxide production. So if you're low in testosterone, you're not going to make nitric oxide. And as I discussed earlier in this video, if you don't make nitric oxide, then you can't do the rest of the cascade to help with your erections. The other thing that testosterone does is it acts as a natural calcium channel blocker itself. I know you've heard of this word, I said it earlier. Remember, when you have a flux of calcium in your cell, you have vasoconstriction. We have to block that calcium in order to get vasodilation. So if you're deficient in testosterone, you're deficient in nitric oxide, and you're not going to block your calcium, which means you're going to have vasoconstriction of your blood vessels. But it doesn't stop there with just testosterone. The best way I explain it to my patients is think of your hormones like a symphony. You have all these different players, right? You've got the flute player, you've got the violin, you've got the piano, and if one section doesn't show up, the music is completely different. It's not the same song. The same thing applies to your body and your hormones. You not only have testosterone, but you have estradiol, and you have progesterone, you have thyroid hormones, you have growth hormone. And so all of these players have to be communicating in order to optimize your performance, whether that's energy or that's vasodilation, it's your sleep, it's your mood, it's your energy. So it's very important that you do seek out a hormone specialist and make sure that your hormones are balanced. So what are the pros of hormone balancing for erectile dysfunction? Remember what I said, testosterone is a potent vasodilator. So it's going to release that nitric oxide and it's going to block your calcium from entering into the cells. So if you don't have enough testosterone, then you're not going to produce enough nitric oxide. And remember, nitric oxide is what is going to relax or cause vasodilation of your blood vessels. And you need vasodilation of the blood vessels so that you can get as much blood through them to the tissue to have an erection. Also remember I said that testosterone is a calcium channel blocker or acts like a calcium channel blocker. And if you have too much calcium in the cell, you're gonna have vasoconstriction, meaning no blood is flowing through those blood vessels going into that tissue. Therefore, you're not gonna have an erection. So with testosterone, if you're deficient, you're not gonna be able to get an erection. But also libido and sex drive and that energy and the sleep and your mood. So if your hormones aren't optimized, you're just not gonna feel good and you're not gonna want to have intercourse. And quite frankly, these guys start to gain weight and they've got low self-esteem and they're not able to build muscle and they're making more fat. So all these things go into play. So let's talk about the cons to hormone optimization. This really comes down to who is helping you treat your hormones. It's so important that you see a hormone specialist who is geared towards treating you and customizing your plan for your needs. And that includes making sure that they're monitoring your blood work. I can't tell you how many patients come into my clinic who haven't had blood drawn in over 2 years by their provider. How can that be? Remember, when you're optimizing your hormones, we need to check everything. I need to make sure that your red blood count and your hemoglobin, hematocrit are all stabilized and normal. They can become elevated if you are having a too high of a dose of testosterone. So sometimes these guys get into the habit of just, they just inject whatever it is that they feel like, or they'll go, years with injecting the same amount when maybe they just didn't need that amount anymore. And so what happens is this starts to accumulate and thicken their blood. If we thicken your blood, now we increase your risk of having a blood clot, a stroke, all these bad things. So we don't want that. You need somebody who actually helps you and make sure that they're monitoring you. You also have to check your kidneys and your liver. Remember, if you're doing injectable testosterone, it has to be broken down by the liver. So your liver actually has to be working in order to break that testosterone down. How do you know if you haven't had your labs drawn in over a year? Same thing with kidneys. If you have pellets placed, pellets are actually filtered through the kidneys, not the liver. Same idea. Where do your kidneys sit? What do they look like? How do you know if you haven't had them checked? And then of course it all comes down to the conversion factor of testosterone. So you need enough testosterone in order to convert into estradiol and dihydrotestosterone, but you want them converted equally, and you don't want too much and you don't want too little. So really it's a balancing act, and you need someone who actually specializes in it, who can sit down with you and go over everything so that you guys can customize your plan based on your needs and know what it is that you're feeling and what's the least amount that you can do and still feel good. Now, I also want to address synthetic versus bioidentical. The best way for me to explain synthetic is when you're having, let's say for instance, Tylenol. You've got a brand name Tylenol and you have a generic name Tylenol. Brand name Tylenol has about 75% of acetaminophen and 25% filler. What's the filler? I don't really know. It just depends on where you go, who's putting it together. But the generic is less of the acetaminophen, so about 50% and then 50% filler. So what I find is that most patients will have side effects from the actual filler, not the medication. It's just the more filler they have, the more side effects they have. So now what I want you to think about is synthetic hormones. Now, if you're putting filler in it, the hormone doesn't look like the hormone in your body. So it's like a key that doesn't fit. You put the key in and you're trying to open up that door, but the key isn't matching the door. So what happens is you can't open the door, and then that key starts to chip off and little layers start to layer up the liver. And then the liver starts to get bogged down. So it's not really doing what you wanted. BIoidentical is just plant-based. It's using soy and yam sterols. So there is no filler, and the molecule actually looks like your molecule. So now it's a key that actually fits. So you inject it, the receptor knows what it is, it locks it in, it does its job, and it quickly leaves. So it's a much nicer process. And what I notice is that the guys who are on synthetic hormones, I can always tell. I can always see it in their liver and their kidneys, and I can see it in the way that they feel. They're the ones with the most side effects. They're the ones that are losing their hair, or they start to develop gynecomastia, or they have an enlarged prostate. Again, these are all things that your hormone specialist should be talking about with you and managing with you. So it's very important that you find someone who specializes in hormones.